the effects of a brain hemorrhage suffered 2 weeks ago, claiming the life of former NBA Commissioner David Stern.
David Stern made it possible for the NBA to scramble from the brink of bankruptcy and irrelevance to a position of global significance unthinkable in the dark days of the late 1970s.
Stern is credited with expanding the number of NBA franchises in the U.S., as well as growing its popularity all around the world.
Because of David, the NBA is a truly global brand.
Over the scorer's table and is trying to get down to the bench.
There's no doubt the passing of former NBA Commissioner David Stern was led to a celebration of life. Stern saw what the NBA could be using his savvy business mindset to grow the game. He inherited drug problems across the association, bankruptcy-riddled teams, and the NBA Finals on tape delay. He created the slam dunk contest with Rick Welts, formed the Dream Team, broadcasted the NBA Draft Lottery in 1985, and grew the NBA globally. While great, like many others in big business, he was imperfect.
The country, and particularly the news outlets, are consumed by the subject that you must do. And the answer is, we had a rule, someone didn't follow it, and I asked him to not come out on a court without being prepared to stand. He said no, and under the rules he was suspended for a day, for a game.
While he acknowledged the president's Twitter account dangling the keys to distract the masses from Puerto Rico, floods, Scott Pruitt's imbecilic nature when head of the EPA, he pointed to a blueprint that history should not applaud, rather shun. Stern spoke on Colin Kaepernick, the famed NFL quarterback who was one win away from a Super Bowl, transcended the game and displayed the potential for this style of quarterbacking, yet was pushed out of the league for protesting systemic racism and racial oppression in the United States. Stern said that Kaepernick should have been suspended by the NFL when he first began kneeling, and if he had been, his career would have been able to continue. Stern chooses rhetoric of discipline the player to save the player. In the 1995-96 season, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, then a Denver Nugget, protested during the national anthem.
He found a compromise solution: to stand and pray during the anthem.
Citing,
it's also a symbol of oppression, of tyranny.
So, Stern invoked this.
Players are to stand during the playing of the national anthem.
Which led to this.
This was the fans' response to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, the Nuggets player who stood and cupped his hands in front of his face in traditional Islamic prayer.
Stern did not welcome Rauf's dissent, but punished him, and virtue signaled to the masses despised this action. Rauf was kicked out of the league, endured death threats, and had his home burned to the ground. He was out of the league at 29 years old. Craig Hodges was a sharpshooter for the Bulls, playing with Michael Jordan, winning 2 championships, and only one of 2 men ever to win 3 straight three-point contests. When Rodney King was beaten by LA police, who were later found not guilty, Hodges approached MJ and Magic Johnson to protest racial inequality. They passed. When the Bulls visited the White House, Hodges wore a dashiki and wrote a letter to then-President George Bush. When the King riots struck Southern California, Hodges urged MJ to use his platform. MJ replied, "I need to know more about it." He called out MJ. 25 days later, Hodges was released by the Bulls with not a single team returning his agent's calls. David Stern said nothing on the subject, but per Hodges, actions speak louder than words. Of course I was blacklisted, he says, but if I say that, it's sour grapes.
What do you remember about implementing the dress code?
All I know is that the union said it was a good thing to do. I did it, and then they attacked me on it.
In 2005, Stern instituted the historic dress code. Jason Richardson was in the league for 14 years and said one thing to me that was kind of racist was you can't wear chains outside your clothing. I don't understand what that has to do with being business approachable. You wear a suit, you still could be a crook. You see all what happened with Enron and Martha Stewart. Just because you dress a certain way doesn't mean you're that way. Hey, a guy could come in with baggy jeans, a do-rag, and have a PhD, and a person who comes in with a suit could be a 3-time felon. Then there's Donald Sterling, former chairman of the Los Angeles Clippers, previously in San Diego, an aloof leader. Sterling was and is to this day a racist that Stern never punished. Sterling would show off his players to his friends, and I quote, Look at all those beautiful black bodies. Former #1 pick Danny Manning stormed out of Sterling's Beverly Hills home when Sterling remarked the team's offer was a lot of money for a poor black. He's faced numerous allegations that he discriminated against would-be renters based on race. The Housing Rights Center, a nonprofit advocacy group, filed a lawsuit against Sterling in 2003 on behalf of more than a dozen African American and Latino rental applicants. A case settled out of court 2 years later. The DOJ sued Sterling in 2006, accusing him of bias against black people at apartments in Beverly Hills and against non-Koreans in K-Town. He settled for $3 million without admitting wrongdoing. David Stern never disciplined Donald Sterling, not a single time. He allowed this action through his own inaction. Stern fined J.R. Smith $50,000 for untying an opponent's shoes. That's $50,000 more than Sterling was ever fined in his NBA tenure. Lastly, the Seattle Supersonics. Stern's cushy relationship with Clay Bennett forced the Sonics to decease and move to Oklahoma City. Seattle is yet to recover. There were lockouts under Stern's leadership. Many lockouts. For his feats, there are miscalculations, failures, and silence. Big business brings out the best and worst, fueled by maximizing revenues while pushing morality on certain subjects to a distance rearview mirrors could not even reach. David Stern was masterful, using a near blank canvas and transforming it into Picasso. Unfortunately, when we look close enough, the colors are smeared, the brights fade, and the viewer sees it for what it is.